Hi everyone, this is Heba from My Little Journal, and today I'm really excited to be sharing with you my 2022 reading journal setup. I am so excited for this. I do this once a year and kind of fill it out as I go as the year goes by. And this year I'm going to be using this beautiful Archer and Olive journal. It's gorgeous. I've already started, so I put in some lines and set up the journal, but I'm going to kind of finish it up with you guys. So I just wanted to save myself some time while I'm recording. But before we start, I wanted to share with you what my 2021 reading journal looks like. I decided to retire this journal. It has 2019, 2020, and 2021. And there's still a lot of space, but I'll end up just using this journal for something else and starting a new one. I kind of get sick of my journals after a while. So it's going to be fun to start a new one. Okay, so let's take a look at my 2021 reading journal. I'm recording this at the end of November, so you're going to see that December's not filled out and things like that. But obviously, once I start reading in December, I will fill those out. My every night challenge, I've been doing really, really well. As you can see, there's just a few days where I didn't read, which is still amazing that I was able to read almost every night or every day. And when I say every night challenge, it's because I read mostly at night, but even if I read throughout the day and didn't read at night, I still color that in. So definitely it works either way. So I ended up adding a flip out for my bookshelf because I thought was going to be reading more. At some point, I think maybe in October, I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of space. So I created this flip out. I don't think I'm going to use the whole thing, which is fine. I do have 2 more books on the spread, but I think I'm going to end up just using that first shelf here for December. And that's fine. I might end up doing one for 2022's reading journal because I hit my goal pretty quickly in 2021. My GoodReads goal was 50. I'm at book number 69, which is crazy. I'm going to have to end up doing that same thing that I did for my bookshelf. I'm going to have to add another page here because I can't fit all of it. My A to Z, never finished my A to Z. I have N, U, V, X, Y, Z left. Let's see if I can get that done by the end of the year, but I don't think so. My TBR, I think for my 2022, I am not going to do a TBR. I'm not sure yet. We'll see, but I might ditch that whole idea because I do change my mind a lot throughout the year and what I want to read. My bingo, I finished that really quickly. So I think for 2022, I'm going to make it bigger and harder to complete because I really want to challenge myself. My monthly review, as you can see, I add my favorite book from the month and then how many books I read. In March, I actually read 7, so I had to end up adding a +1. I miscounted that. No big deal, but I like to kind of choose one book throughout the month that I really, really enjoyed and add that. And then at the end of the year, I can kind of see my top 12 books from the year. My reading with Heba page turned out so cool. I really love how this looks. I do have to add the babysitter for November. And then December, we are reading this Tenderland, I think that's what it's called. So I'm going to be filling this out very soon. And I really love our little book club. If you're not a part of the book club, I definitely recommend it. I always have it linked in the description box. But it's helped me read different genres and books that I've been wanting to read forever and never got the chance to get to. So definitely recommend it. And I love this spread. I did do a book of the month spread. This idea I got from another bullet journaler. I think her name was Mackenzie. If I find her YouTube channel, I will link her down in the description box for you. But she has a beautiful style and I love that idea. So this is definitely not my idea. But I ended up not doing so well for my book of the month. I usually try to just choose one book for my book of the month and not get any add-ons. I'm guessing it's okay. I still have a lot to read, but I will move this to my 2022 reading journal. And this is my buddy reading with Elizabeth. We read a big book, one big book a month, and we did so well this year. We started, I think, in March. So you're going to see that January and February do not exist on the spread. But we started in March and we got to read some really hefty books. As you can see, we read The Stand, and that's 1,149 pages. That's crazy. And now I just need to fill out November and December. We're doing pretty good with our big book challenge. And then I decided to do kind of like a whole layout of the covers from the books I read. And I saw this on, I think, Instagram, and I loved how it looked. So I went with it. Really happy that I did because this turned out so cool, so much fun. And I will definitely be doing it for my 2022 reading journal. Obviously, I still have more to print out, but I tried to wait until I read like 8 books and then I print them all at once and add them to my spread. And it's so simple to do. Now, for this spread, I thought I would document my audiobooks. This became pretty expensive really quick because I was printing out these photos and decided to ditch the whole idea halfway through. And as you can see, I totally forgot to add the K for books, which doesn't matter anyways. I ended up doing 2 spreads, and you can see I didn't even complete it. I definitely read a lot of audiobooks, and I thought to myself, this is going to get really expensive to fill out, and I don't want to waste my photo paper. So I kind of ditched the idea, and this doesn't bother me. I know a lot of people don't like that, start something and not finish it kind of thing. But if I feel like something is getting pricey and not worth it, I just stop it because I'd rather use that photo paper for something else. So I totally ditched that. I'm fine with that. And that is literally the last spread in my 2021 reading journal. And as you can see, it was so much fun. It is beautiful. I was able to document all the books I read this year. And I know now what I like and don't like. I've been adding every year to my reading journal. You can see here this is my 2019, and it's not as massive. There's just a few challenges, but I kind of added to it as I went. I didn't read as much. Well, I read plenty. I read 54 books in 2019, but I think in 2021, I wanted to add more challenges and change it up a little bit. And I love the new additions. And there's some things that I'm going to completely not do in 2022. But anyways, I wanted to share with you my 2022 reading journal setup. I will speed this up and do a little voiceover just so this video isn't very, very long. So let's get to it. Okay, guys, let's start working in my reading journal. I'm going to start with my title page. I really want to keep this simple, so I decided to go with my Reading with Heba stamp set from Feed Your Craft. I will stamp the stack of books right in the center, and then I want to stamp Stop and Smell the Pages right underneath that. I love the look of just a simple title page because there's a lot to do in this reading journal. Keeping my title page simple is the way to go. So I want to bring in some color. I will use the filler stamp for the stack of books to add color using some different ink pads from Close to My Heart. And I will also fill out the coffee cup as well. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to move on to my first spread. Now, my first spread is usually the nightly reading challenge, but I'm going to change up the title this year, but everything else kind of looks the same. I'm keeping my log the same, and I'm going to add the months up top using the stamp set from Everyday Explorers. I believe this is the calendar day stamp set. And they fit nicely in the boxes. That's why I always use that stamp set for that. I will also be using Carrie Bradford's alpha stamps. These alphas are my favorite because they don't have that extra acrylic around it. So you can get the alphas pretty close to each other and stamp the whole word on the same block, if that makes sense. So this year I'm calling it Daily Reading Challenge instead of Nightly Reading Challenge, because basically I read day and night, so it just makes more sense to track if I read every day and not if I read every night. So while I was stamping my title, I didn't really care if they were centered or not. You're going to see this a lot throughout my titles, or my pages, but that doesn't bother me because I knew I wanted to use my book stamps to fill in between the words, if that makes sense. So you can see like the reading and the challenge are pretty far away from each other, but that was on purpose because I wanted to use my book stamps to fill those spaces out. That way I can use more of my stamps and add more color to my spreads. So I end up using a lot of different book stamps for these spreads. This one is probably from Carrie Bradford. I end up using some Feed Your Craft stamps as well, Studio Calico, whatever I use and is still available, I will link it in the description box for you. And if it's not available, I'll definitely add not available. But anyways, I'm just using my book stamps and the fillers to add color to my books and add color to my spread. Really, this does not take me a lot, and I'm fine by doing this once a year. It's not a big deal. The end results are always so fun, and I just end up filling these out as I go. So I only have to sit down once a year, set up my pages, and I'm good to go. Now this stamp, the filler was the whole stamp. So all the books were on one stamp, which is fine by me. I was just inking up the book I wanted. And if there was excess ink, I would just remove it with my finger or my chamois and fill out those books with some color. These smaller ones didn't have filler stamps, and you're going to see in a bit the last book stack that I stamp on the spread. I will end up grabbing my markers and filling them out myself. So you really don't have to have the filler stamp to fill out these books. You can definitely use your markers. I end up using some of my Tombow markers, my Crayola markers, and even my acrylograph markers as well. So for my daily reading log, I like to add lines in between just to kind of separate these little boxes because you can't really see the dots. So I'm going to just share with you how I do that. I will end up finishing all of these spreads up at the end and sharing photos at the end. But for now, I'm just adding a few lines just so you can see the end result or how it will end up looking. We'll add my numbers as well. And then I'm going to grab my gray marker to add some shadowing or drop shadow to my box and some drop shadowing to my title. Once I finish doing that, I will move on to my next spread. We'll add this gray down in the description box for you. This is a Tombow marker, and it's one of my favorite grays. It's a nice cool gray, and that's what I love about it. It just adds the perfect shade of gray to your spread. Let's move on to my book Shelfie. This is by far my favorite spread every year in my book journal. And I want to add more books to my shelves than I usually do because lately I've been reading more and I've been needing more books to fill out. So I decided to go heavy on the book stacks, less on the decoration, if that makes sense. So I'm using the Studio Calico stamp set. Again, it's one of my favorites to add my books on the shelf. I love this stamp because the books are pretty large and they're great to add the titles of the books you read. I know there's a lot of stamp sets with different stacks of books, but this one is by far my favorite just because I have the space to add the title of the book. As you can see, my stamping isn't always perfect. Some of these books are not like perfectly stamped, which is a-okay with me. I always feel like when I decorate my bookshelves, it really helps cover up all the little mistakes. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think even if you drew these books out that they are going to be perfect. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my little decor to my bookshelves. I always use this globe from a Studio Calico stamp set. I will add or use Feed Your Crafts shelf stamp set, I think, or it's on my shelf stamp set to stamp little boxes, flowers, plant pots and plants and just little things here and there. And I love the stamp set because it has fillers, which is perfect and easy to use. I don't have to color them in myself, but I'm just going back and forth in between different colors of ink pads just to bring in some color to my bookshelf. But once I start reading and filling out the books, this page turns out to be really, really cool, like I shared earlier with you when I went through my 2021 reading journal. It comes out to be very colorful, very neat, and this is why this spread is one of my favorites in my reading journal. And at some point, I even go through my die cuts to add some texture to my spread. And I found this little die cut. It's an old one. It's a glass with a flower and it fit nicely in between my books. So I went with it. I also want to stamp book Shelfie right above my bookshelf. I love this alpha stamp from Freckled Fawn. It's the perfect font. So I'm going to stamp book Shelfie using that alpha stamp. But I also want to bring in color and I don't want to use more book stamps because I have so many books on this spread. So what I decide to do is go through my sticker sheets, and I have loads of book related sticker sheets. I found a very old Brandy Kincaid Feature Craft sticker sheet that had two little labels. One said found in a book, the other said lost in a book. So I'm going to add those to my title. It brings in some color and I love how it looks. I'm also going to finish up the spread by adding color to my title just by using a marker. I will grab my almond colored Tombow marker to color in my bookshelves, and I believe I colored the little globe that I added to my bookshelves, and then I will call this one done and move on to my next spread. Okay, let's move on to our next spread. So this spread is going to hold my what I read throughout 2022. But usually this spread, I called it my GoodReads 50 because I would write the title of the book, the author, and then the star rating. But I felt like actually this should be my what I read log instead of my GoodReads log. And my GoodReads should just be something I fill out, not with the titles, if that makes sense. So I'm going to switch it around this year. I stamped what I read using this alpha stamp from Studio Calico. I will also use the stamp set from Carrie Bradford to stamp a stack of books and an open book around my title. But that little stack of books does not have a filler, so I'm just going to use my markers to fill them out. This is a great way to add color to a very bland kind of spread just because this is more of logging. I'm not going to be adding a lot of color to this spread, so I wanted to add color to my stack of books instead. I do want to go ahead and add a drop shadow to my box. I want to add numbers to keep track of how many books I read in 2022. And I'm going to use that gray Tombow marker to add lines kind of in between each other. So what I mean is I am skipping a line. So I add gray to one, I'll skip the other. That way it adds some color to my spread and also helps me kind of focus because sometimes when I look at all these lines, it's kind of confusing. But when you skip a line and add color to the other line, it really helps you focus more on the line that you're working on, if that makes sense. But anyways, I'm going to finish this up by stamping my 5 stars. This is a very old stamp set from Studio Calico. It fits really nicely in my boxes, and I use it every year in my reading journal. So let's move on to my A to Z challenge. I've mentioned this before. I never finished this challenge, but I love it and I try every single year. But for 2022, I wanted to change it up and I drew this large book. and it was really easy to do. I don't draw, so if I was able to draw it, you can too. So all I did was I stamped A to Z, and I decided to add this yellow line in between the A to Z just because I felt like I stamped that Z way too close to the 2, if that makes sense. I will also use my Tombow markers to add color to my bookmark and the spine of my book. And then I'll use that gray marker again to add lines in between. This is going to help kind of separate the lines, and it adds color to my book. So I also changed up my GoodReads challenge this year as well. This was a total scrap lift from a YouTuber called Mackenzie. I'm going to link her video or her YouTube channel down in the description box for you. I decided to focus on how many books for my challenge, then focus on the titles and the stars, if that makes sense. So that's why I switched out my GoodReads with what I read layout. So this is very basic, very simple. I'm going to have the genres that I read the most on the bottom. I'm going to make myself a little key. So I'm going to color those circles in. And every time I read a book that is a thriller, I will use this really pretty mustard yellow. If I read a nonfiction, I will use this beautiful blue. And that way, when I look at this, when I'm done with my GoodReads challenge, I can see how many books I read that were thrillers, how many books I read that were romance, and so on and so forth. But this year, my goal is 60 books. It's usually 50, but because I read so much in 2021, I thought I might be able to hit that 60 goal in 2022. But anyways, let's move on to my Reading with Hibba book club spread. I'm keeping it like I had it in 2021. I just added my boxes, and now I'm using that same Everyday Explorers Calendar Day stamp set to stamp the month. And I'll just finish up the boxes by adding the lines. I made sure not to use my pen to add the lines at the top because I knew I was going to stamp the month. And once I stamp the month, I can finish up my boxes with my pen. I will just change up the alpha stamp that I use for this layout. I went more bigger and bolder. These are alpha stamps from, I believe, Studio Calico. And I'm using this really pretty blue because my logo is blue. So I'm just going to stamp reading on one side and with Heba on the opposite side. I will also go through my sticker sheets, and I'm going to grab my reading with Heba sticker sheet to add my logo to my spread. And it kind of represents what the spread is all about. I will finish up the spread by adding a drop shadow to my boxes, and I'll grab that same 5-star stamp to stamp underneath each box because I do want to keep kind of a log of what my star rating was for each month. Now, if you're not a part of my book club, definitely recommend to join us. I always have it linked in the description box. We choose really good books every month. We have such a blast in our little discussions, and it's a great little book club to join. So last year, my bingo challenge was much smaller and really not so challenging. So this year, I thought I'm going to add more boxes, make this more challenging, and kind of look online for new things to add in these boxes. And I just wanted to make it more challenging for me. So I'm freehanding these boxes. Yes, they're all wonky, but I actually like how they look. And I'm going to be stamping right in the center a little heart, just to give myself like a free pass to create my little bingo. And I'm gonna stamp out bingo. So when I started stamping out bingo, I get to the O, and I kind of think to myself, oh, maybe I should stamp something else than an O, but something that represents the O, if that makes sense, maybe a book or whatever. But I just go with it and I just stamp the O. But then remember that I have a stamp that has Let's Stay Home, and it has a little book and coffee cup, and it fit perfectly over that O. So I decided to go with it. I'm going to stamp it on some just paper, same paper from Archer and Olive, And then I'm going to use it to cover that O, and it just adds a little something to my title, and I'm so happy I thought about that. I felt like this spread was not balanced enough, so what I decided to do was to stamp a book stack on the bottom, and that way I can balance it out and that bottom portion doesn't look empty. I will also go through my stickers and just add a little something underneath my book stack just to bring in some color. So I grabbed my Tombow marker in that same orangey shade and colored in my title and call the spread done. I will end up adding everything into my boxes later. I just didn't want to sit here and do this while I'm recording. But like I said earlier, I will add photos at the end of the video finishing up all the spreads. Now we're moving on to this next layout where I do have another bookshelf. But this challenge is called Reading to Zero. I really want to read my bookshelf and my Kindle. I have so many books on my Kindle and so many books on my bookshelves that have been neglected and not read. So I decided to keep this bookshelf pretty simple. I drew my own books and I kept them pretty tight because I don't know how many books I'm going to be able to read, but I also want to kind of focus on reading the books, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use that same Carrie Bradford stamp set to stamp Reading to Zero. Again, keeping this simple, I'm just going to go through my die cuts. I find a little die cut to add right next to my title, and I will color in the bookshelf with my Tombow marker and call the spread done. I just really want to kind of focus on reading my older books, the books that I know are good and I haven't had time to get to them. You know, when you get new books, you just forget about your old ones. I just don't want to do that anymore. So I'm really hoping to stop buying new books in 2022 and focus on reading my older books that I've had for ages and really neglected. So as you can see, I had to trim down that die cut so it can fit next to my title. But right now I'm just going to color in my bookshelf and we can move on to the next spread in my reading journal. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention that this Reading to Zero challenge is done by another YouTuber who I will link in the description box. But that is a challenge that she started in 2021, and I wanted to start myself in 2022. Anyways, let's move on to our next spread here. My friend and I, Elizabeth, we buddy read big books every month. So every month we choose a big book and we read it together. Sometimes they have been amazing books and sometimes they were complete fails. So I love how I documented it last year, but I just shrunk down the little boxes a little bit just to fit nicely onto my spread. And I stamped Buddy Reading Big Books with Liz. I will also fill out these boxes with my acrylograph black ink, I believe I used, and I will use the white pen to fill them out. So these boxes are holding page count, date, and then the title, and the bigger box is going to hold a picture of the book cover. Now, I am going to lose footage right around here when I start coloring in everything. As you can see, it kind of jumped a little bit and it moved to the next spread. So you didn't get to see how I finished my first spread of Buddy Reading, which is okay. And then you miss out on my monthly review spread and on my January calendar spread. I'm so sorry, you guys. I will talk a little bit about this once I'm done setting up my February calendar, but I lost footage. I don't know what happened. I decided to do February just to share with you how I set up January, but this is all new to my reading journal. I've never done a monthly log, but I thought it would be fun to do that. and I'm using the stamp set from the Paper Person shop. Now it has 7 boxes, but the 7 boxes were really hard to stamp. So I decided to trim it down to 5 and kind of use it as the weeks, not like weekly, if that makes sense. So the month, not weekly, that's what I'm trying to say. So it was just easier to stamp them that way. And you can still stamp 5 weeks throughout the month and then 7 days throughout the week. Once I stamp out my boxes, I'm going to grab the days of the week and stamp those as well, but I do trim those down as well so they can fit on my stamp block, and it's just easier to stamp. Now I'm almost done stamping the days of the week, and I apologize for the lost footage, but I promise to do a flip through at the end of this video and just share with you all the spreads that wasn't shared in this video. But anyways, I want to stamp February using this large alpha stamp from the Paper Person shop. And I think I'm going to keep these spreads very similar throughout the months just because I like to stick to simple, cohesive spreads when I have to do them over and over. That way I don't have to think hard about it. I will also stamp books, and I'm going to go back to that first stamp set from the Paper Person shop to stamp this box of lists. I think the stamp set is so basic and so perfect for layouts like this. If you are creating like monthly spreads, this is the stamp set for you. I'm going to use the box to kind of keep up with the books I read for each month. Now, I grabbed this stamp set from Close to My Heart. It has the book stack, and it's large and big, and it's perfect. So I'm going to stamp that right next to or in between my calendar and my list box. For the first spread for January, I used that stamp set to stamp the female reading a book. I just love the stamp set. The stamps are pretty big and they're perfect for spreads like these. And I also stamped read right underneath my books, and I'm going to use the filler to add color to my read. And then I'm going to build off of that same color to add little dots for my list and little dots for my calendar. Again, that's why I love that large stamp set from the Paper Person shop, because everything you need to create a calendar is on that stamp set. Now I'm almost done. I'm just adding some washi tape to the corner of my spread, and I will stamp Cozy Up with a Good Book right above my calendar. And then I call my layouts done. So simple, so easy. I had so much fun putting these together. It took me a couple of days to get it done. And yes, we lost some footage, but we got it together, and I was able to finish setting up my reading journal for 2022. But at this point, I want to jump into real time and share with you what went wrong, what I created, and talk a little bit about all the pages in my new reading journal for 2022. I just want to do a quick flip through of how my reading journal turned out. Whatever my camera didn't record or whatever didn't share, I will let you know what I used and how I created it, basically. But anyways, I started my title page. Very simple. I used the Reading with Hibba stamp set. That is from Feed Your Craft, and everything I share will be linked in the description box. But I created a daily reading challenge. This last year, if you guys remember, was my reading every night challenge. And I changed it up a little bit, changed the challenge just because I felt like I've been reading throughout the day as well and not just at night. So definitely wanted to change that. Then we have the book Shelfie. So I tried really hard to add more books for 2022 just because I read more in 2021. So again, if I end up needing more space, I'll do what I did for 2021 and add a little flip out for it. But that's how that turned out. I really love this. And that stamp set from Studio Calico is by far one of my favorites. I use it every year since the day I bought it. Then we move on to what I read. This is a list of the books I read throughout the year. So every time I read a book, I just fill it out and add the stars. very simple. I used more stamps this year than last year. But anyways, I added a few new challenges and changed it up a tiny bit. This one last year, I called it the GoodReads 50 challenge. So read 50 books. But I thought I needed that place to add the books I read. And then I'll do a different page for my GoodReads. So I did the A to Z, which I mentioned before. I never end up finishing the A to Z challenge. But I did something different this year and created a little book. Really like that look. Obviously is not my idea. As I said before, I watch a lot of YouTube bullet journalers and Pinterest and get a lot of ideas from Instagram as well. Then I did the GoodReads. I added 10 more books for 2022 just because I hit my goal in 2021 and I thought, maybe I can do it again. So I added 1 through 60, and if I read more, I can add that as well. And I'm going to use this color coding to fill out the books. So basically, I just added thriller, romance, nonfiction, and favorites. Those are basically the books I like to read the most. And I'll add more categories as I go, probably. And then we have the Reading with Heba book club. This, I kept it the same. I basically just changed out the font and kept everything the same because I really liked how it looked in 2021, just adding the book covers and the star rating. Then we have the bingo challenge. I do this, I think, every year. So it's totally not my idea. Again, a lot of Pinterest and Instagram there, just inspiration from other creators. But I wanted to make this more of a challenge for me this year. So I added more boxes, changed it up a little bit, added some stamping, and really like how that looks. I'm doing a reading to 0. So this is basically me reading my library and my Kindle. So I have a lot of books on my Kindle. I have a lot of books in my library, and I really want to get to them and read them. Some of them are older, some of them are newer. But every time I read a book, I'm just going to color in this book. So this is totally different than my bookshelf. My bookshelf is basically, I'll write down the title of the book and color in, but this is basically going to keep me reading what I already have. So I will fill this out to be the same amount of books that I haven't read in my Kindle and in my library, and that way I can fill them out as I go. So this is where I stopped recording. I don't know what happened, honestly, but the only thing you missed was I added a title to my spread. So this is my buddy reading big books with Elizabeth. And I kept it the same. I did kind of the same thing last year, and I really liked how it looked. I just shrunk down the boxes a little bit. I felt like they were too big. And I added the title at the top and used smaller stamps for that. And I really like how this looks, really fun. And basically, I tried to share as much as I could once I figured out that I lost all the footage. But anyways, this is so much fun to do. I really love this challenge that I get to read with my friend. And we read some really big books and add more pages to my page count. So I wasn't able to share this with you guys because, again, we lost some footage, but this is exactly the same as last year's. I kept it the same because it works for me. I do it every single year, and I just add my favorite book from that month and how many books I read that month, and just added monthly review, keeping it very simple. I might add some shadowing to my boxes, some like a drop shadow, just because I feel like it's a little bit too bland, or maybe I'll add some washi tape at the bottom as well. So this is another spread that I wasn't able to share with you because of the lost footage, but I recreated it for February because I wanted you to see what I used to create January. The only difference is I used that same stamp set from Close to My Heart, but on this spread, I used the woman with the book, and this one, I just stamped the books, and I will color those in as well. But I kept it the same. This was not planned. I actually thought I was going to draw out my calendar, but I knew I had that stamp set from the paper person, and I thought, you know what, this would probably be easier for me to just stamp it out, and it actually was, and I'm really happy that I remembered this and that I had that stamp set because it just made everything so nicely and cohesive. And I can do this every single month, and I'll just end up adding the books that I read in these boxes. And if I even read more, I can, stamp out some more. But that's about it, you guys. That is my reading journal setup for 2022. I hope you enjoyed it, and apologize for all the missing footage, but I really enjoy keeping a journal for my reading just because I read so much, and it's so much fun to kind of look back and see what you read, how many books you read, what you enjoyed and didn't enjoy. I know there is GoodReads available, but I feel like having it on paper makes a huge difference. And hopefully this journal will last me a couple of years. I'm excited about it, and I'm excited to see what you guys create for your reading journals. Please tag me on Instagram. I would love to see what you guys created using some of these threads as inspiration. But anyways, I will add all the links for everything I use down in the description box for you. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Bye.